Today, we're going to take a journey from the manor to the metropolis. It's a story about a massive transformation, a time when medieval Europe completely remade itself. So let's dive in and see how this all went down. So, how did it happen? I mean, how do you get from a world that's basically stuck in place for centuries to this explosion of cities and trade that really kicked off the world we live in now? That's the big question we're tackling today. For hundreds of years after the fall of Rome, this right here, this was pretty much it. You didn't really have big cities, life was out in the countryside, and it revolved around these huge estates called manors. Each one was its own little self-sufficient world, the center of the universe for the people who lived there. Okay, so before we get to the big changes, you've got to understand just how locked in this old world was. It wasn't about freedom or choice. It was a life built completely on obligation.
Almost everybody, the huge majority of people, were serfs. Now, they weren't slaves in the sense that you could sell them one by one, but let's be real, they weren't free either. They were legally tied to the plot of land they worked. If a new lord took over the manor, the serfs came with the property.
Now, this is what I find so fascinating. This isn't some generic description. This comes from a real ledger. We're talking about a real guy, Hugh Miller, and the details of his life. Just imagine your entire year being mapped out by these payments. And notice, most of it isn't money. It's your own sweat and the chickens from your yard.
And that really gets to the heart of it. For your average person, money was almost irrelevant. Everything you needed, food, clothes, tools, was made right there. You paid your dues with work or with eggs. And because of that, life was predictable. It was monotonous. And for generation after generation, it just stayed the same.
But then, something started to bubble up. Something totally new that was a direct threat to that whole way of life. And that something was the town.
Just look at the difference here. It's night and day, right? On one side, you have the wide open, spread out agricultural world of the manor. And on the other, boom, the medieval town. It's all crammed together, buildings reaching for the sky, streets are narrow. It's a completely different vision for how to live.
This table really nails the key differences. You go from being stuck in one isolated place to being connected, from being bound to the land to having freedom of movement, from working for some lord to maybe, just maybe, working for yourself. It was a total paradigm shift from a world of barter to a world run on money and ambition. And here's the kicker. Towns meant one thing more than anything else: freedom. There was this amazing rule, a kind of legal loophole. If you were a serf and you could manage to escape to a town and survive for a year and a day without your old lord catching you, you were legally free. Can you imagine? Towns became these beacons of hope.
Okay, so what's the spark that lit this fire? What was the engine driving all this change? Well, it really boils down to one word: trade. For centuries, Europe had been pretty fragmented and isolated, but now you can see it on this map. It's like the continent's arteries started pumping again, and right at the heart of it were Italian cities like Venice and Genoa. They were the bridge to the east, funneling all these incredible new goods northwards.
And what were they bringing in? We're not talking about just grain and wool. We're talking about luxuries, things most people in Europe hadn't seen for centuries. Spices to make bland food taste amazing, silks that felt like nothing else, brilliant cottons. This stuff was a complete game changer. It created this huge new demand for, well, a better, more interesting life. Right, but there's a catch. You can't exactly trade a few chickens for a bolt of silk from China when you're 1,000 miles away. It just doesn't work. For this kind of long-distance trade to happen, you need one thing: a universal currency. All of a sudden, that moneyless world of the manor just couldn't keep up. Cash had to make a comeback.
So all this cash flowing around creates a whole new group of people. They're not lords, they're not serfs, they don't fit the old model. These are the merchants, the craftsmen, and they had to build their own system, their own social order, right there in the towns.
And the way they did that was through guilds. Now, what's a guild? Well, think of it as part union, part chamber of commerce, with a little bit of quality control thrown in. The guilds basically ran the towns. They set the rules for their trade, they protected their members, and they made sure the local lord couldn't just boss them around. And here's what was so revolutionary. Inside a guild, you had a career path. You could climb the ladder. You'd start as an apprentice, learning the ropes, then you'd become a journeyman, earning real wages, and if you were good and a little lucky, you could become a master with your own shop. For the first time in forever, your future wasn't just decided by who your parents were. It was about your skill.
And you know what happens when you have a lot of money, right? You get political influence. Kings needed cash to fight their wars, and guess who had it? The towns. So pretty soon, kings started calling up representatives from the towns to their councils. They needed their money, sure, but they also needed their practical advice. The business class now had a seat at the table. So you've got all this new wealth, all this new civic pride. What do you do with it? Well, you build. And what they built were some of the most breathtaking structures ever made. You can see the whole story right here in the architecture. Look at the old Romanesque style on the left. It's like a fortress, right? Heavy, dark, thick walls. It's defensive. But then look at the Gothic style on the right. Whoa, it's all about height and light. It's like it's reaching for the sky. That's the look of a confident, ambitious new society. So how'd they pull it off? What was the secret? It was this brilliant piece of engineering, the flying buttress. Basically, they built a skeleton on the outside of the building. This skeleton held up the roof, which meant the walls didn't have to be thick and heavy anymore. The walls could just be windows. Massive, incredible stained glass windows. And this is what it felt like. Imagine walking off a dark, narrow, muddy street and into this, a space just flooded with color and light, soaring up to the heavens. These weren't just buildings. They were experiences. They were designed to lift you up, literally and spiritually. So when you look at one of these cathedrals, you're seeing the whole story in one building. The money came from trade, the skills came from the guilds, and the soaring ambition, that came from a community's pride and faith. It's the manor completely transformed into the metropolis, right there in stone. It's incredible, right? This massive shift, driven by new trade and new technology, it literally created the foundations of our modern world. And it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What are the huge forces that are reshaping our world right now in the same way?